The following accounts have been submitted by subscribers. These stories are claimed to describe true events. I ask you to listen in good faith and decide for yourself what to believe. I spent my childhood days in our ancestral house, where I lived with my parents and grandparents. While my parents worked the whole day, my grandparents would take care of me. I was an extreme nuisance, they used to say. None of the girls in the neighborhood created problems like I did. I was always getting in trouble. As I remember my stay in that house, I can hardly remember anything pleasant. Even today, the thought of that house gives me inevitable, unsettling feelings. When I was 7 years old, I saw my parents fight a lot. My grandparents had problems with my parents, and often my mom had serious arguments. Feuds with the neighbor were a common thing to occur every alternate day. My dad is an extremely charming person, but I remember he used to get drunk due to the monetary crisis my whole family was facing at that moment. I never got good grades. The atmosphere in the house was negative all around, and it became normal for me as a child. In this negative atmosphere, there were many instances that kept occurring to me as I was growing up. One afternoon, I was laying down on my right side, cuddling my doll. Suddenly, there was a slow scratch on my pillow from behind. My dad often used to play pranks, and so, without any doubt, I thought it was him. I remember turning around saying, "Dada," but the room was empty. Confused, I rolled back over. Then, again, the scratch occurred. This time, the sound was stronger. I turned and a bit louder said, "Dada, I know you're there." Once again, he wasn't, and this happened again another 2 times. Certain my dad was playing a prank, I even checked if he was hiding under the bed, but it was clear. This time I lay on my left and faced the room. Again, the scratch on my pillow from behind. There was no chance someone was doing this, as my back was facing the wall this time. With my dad clearly not in the room, I was scared. I got up and ran out of that room. My parents, it turned out, were still at the office. As I said, I was a nuisance creating child. Because of this, I was barred from visiting the terrace alone. One afternoon, my grandparents were taking an afternoon nap, and I took the chance to slip away from their watch and climb up the narrow stairs to the terrace. I was walking along the edge, and it was like one of my wishes had been fulfilled. Then, suddenly, to my surprise, I saw my grandma looking at me from the ground. She stared at me for some time and then went inside. Why did she not scold me? I remember thinking at the time. When my parents came back, she would no doubt complain about it to them. Later that day, in the evening when my parents got back, we all ate dinner together at the table. My grandma didn't say anything about me sneaking up to the terrace. When everyone was getting ready to go to bed, I went to her and asked if she was mad at me. My grandma was surprised and said, "No, child, why do you ask that?" I asked her why she didn't say anything as I walked on the edge of the terrace. My grandma was in shock and frightened. She asked me when this had happened and told me that I was not supposed to go up there. "What if you had fallen?" she asked, very concerned. She made me swear not to repeat my behavior, and watching her like that, I promised, scared. But then it struck me, if my grandma had not seen me, who did? I clearly remember her watching me with cold eyes. I can still see them. Another incident that I have no explanation for happened when I was about 8 years old. When there was a power cut, I used to see my grandpa go to the electric box, fix some wires and turn the power back on. A child constantly searching for answers to my numerous curiosities. Once again, I slipped out and, curious to know what was inside, climbed up the ladder to reach the electricity box. I opened the box and was amazed. Red, yellow and green wires all entangled inside. I put my hand inside without taking a second thought. I touched each of those metal bolts and wires, and when I was content, was about to take out my hand when, and I swear upon God, believe me, there was another hand which came out and just touched my thumb and went inside. I screamed, and next I remember, I was surrounded by all my family members. My cousins were also there in the house that day. My parents were very worried. They said I was lying on the ground, passed out for a few moments. I tried to explain what had happened to my mom, as I knew no one else would believe me. My mom said it was the hand of God who saved me before anything more serious could have happened. But was it? I'm not sure. She said it scared her to death to see me like that, as I could have so easily been electrocuted for what I did. As I grew up, similar incidents kept on happening. When I was 11 years old, my parents got transferred to a different city, and I had to leave our house and my grandparents behind. Time went by and my grandparents got older. They were betrayed by their closest ones, and a part of our properties were taken away. Feuds with the neighbours continued. As I said, nothing good ever happened inside that house. Eventually my grandma went into a coma, and after struggling for 3 months, she passed away. Within 2 months, my grandpa was also no more. The loss was hard for me to take. Aged 14, I regretted having left them behind. There was too much debt to keep the house, and so my dad finally made the decision to sell it. As I remember, it was sold at a very low rate. From that moment, it seemed as though peace and calmness prevailed in the family. My father already had a change in his behaviour. He became sober and peaceful. Our financial condition improved. I went for higher studies and completed my PhD. Overall, we have come a long way from that tense and stressful time that my family faced when living in that house. A decade passed after the house was sold, and I decided to visit my old town. Aged 28, I took a walk and asked about the person who was living at the house now. I learned that the person was not well. He was suffering. Within a year after he bought the house, he got sick and came to be in a wheelchair. At present, he is facing crisis in all different aspects of his life. It seems that something very negative lurks in that house. The attacks were never physical. I experienced many things but never felt threatened. What I feel is that, whatever it is, it fed upon our sorrow, our stress, our bad health, our fear, and I do not regret at all selling our ancestral home. Several paranormal experiences happened to me and my housemates whilst at college in Malaysia. There were 6 of us in a house, 3 rooms, 2 in each room. When we first moved there, we didn't feel anything strange. Nothing felt out of place. However, before too long, this would all change. The first incident that happened was to a housemate while she was in her room. My roommate and I were shocked when we suddenly heard her cry out. When we asked her what had happened, she told us that she had been pushed into the closet. She had been taking her things out when she felt someone push her. After that, she couldn't stay in the house for a week. The next incident happened to another roommate during the evening after class. All of us are in the same class and group, and so we all have the same schedule. We arrived at our house around 1 PM. My roommate and I went straight to our room. She fell asleep on her bed, and I fell asleep on the floor whilst laying down. Another housemate was playing with her phone in her room next door. At that time, there were only 3 of us in the house. However, that night, one of our roommates left the house to stay at another friend's. She told us she did this because she thought there was no one home that evening, and she didn't want to be alone. We were all shocked. We told her that there were 3 of us at the house that evening, but she said no, there wasn't. She told us that she went to my room and didn't see either me or my roommate. I was perplexed. I told her that I was asleep on the floor and my roommate was sleeping on her bed, but she swore she never saw us. When she went to another room, she found the door was locked. Again, this didn't make any sense. My roommate who was in that room told her that she had not locked the door. She was not even sleeping. She was playing on the phone at the time. She even showed us a tweet that she had posted during that time. Still, my roommate maintained that her room was locked and she never saw any of us. There was no explanation. The third incident happened to me and my roommate. That time there were only 2 of us in the house at night. She was washing her clothes whilst I was playing with my phone on the bed. She had just eaten and had placed her bowl with the fork and spoon inside in the kitchen before going to check her laundry. It was then that we heard the sound of something hitting the floor. I got up and saw the fork in front of our door. She came out the bathroom and just stared at it on the floor. Shocked, we looked at each other. When she placed the bowl with the fork inside, she had placed it on the counter next to the sink. If the fork hadn't been placed properly inside the bowl, it would have fallen near the sink or counter. So how did it fall in front of our room? The next incident is probably the scariest one that ever happened. 3 of us were in the house at that time. The others were sleeping elsewhere, so we all decided to sleep in the same room. We were finishing our assignment and it was nearing 1 in the morning. We all went to bed at the same time. My eyes were only closed for about 5 minutes when I heard a knocking sound. At first I thought I heard it wrong. Then suddenly one of my roommates asked, "Did you guys hear that?" Another replied that she had, and we knew it wasn't the front door because it sounded different. It was from the window. All 3 of us got up and closed the windows, pulling the curtains closed. They fell asleep after that, but I couldn't. I was too scared. At 4 in the morning I still couldn't fall asleep, so I opened my laptop and watched a TV show. Then I heard it again. The knocking. This time it was longer. I ignored it, put on headphones and raised the volume, but I could still hear the knocking. Then it ended. This incident continued to happen for a few days until we called the college's electrician to fix our broken ceiling fan. The first thing he said when he saw our house was, "Wait, not this house." We asked him what he meant, curious if he had heard any stories about our house. He looked at his friend and told us that before this, the previous occupants who had stayed in our house had reported hearing knocking from the windows. Apparently, she had been studying late when she heard it. There were lots of smaller incidents that happened during our time at the house. Hearing the tap water being turned on in the bathroom, the feeling of someone watching us. After the knocking incident, nothing big really happened. We all tried to ignore all of the small incidents and attempted to move on with our lives. After all, we couldn't move out of the house. Since it was provided by the college, we had to stay there for a semester. Then we could move out. That was the first time any of us ever experienced anything like that. It's been 4 years since, and I will never forget it. My experiences are hard to talk about due to some of the things that have happened to me in my life. I grew up in central Wisconsin in a poor family. The house that we have lived in was an old farmhouse. By the time we moved in, the place was already starting to fall apart. I remember being a small child and always being able to see things standing around my bed at night when I tried to sleep. Once in a while, I would feel fingers go across my face and through my hair. That never scared me. If anything, it conditioned me for my life to come. When I was in school, I would get picked on because of the clothes I would wear. My family could not afford much. The constant bullying and getting into fights gave me a reputation of being a tough guy. I was always one of those people who you would call if you needed help with something, or if something bad was happening and you needed someone there to protect you. My first major experience happened to me around the age of 14. There were rumours about this old abandoned church that was supposed to have a lot of paranormal things happening there. Being in the group of people that I was associated with at the time, I was not scared. So one night, my 2 sisters, a couple of friends and myself went to this abandoned church and broke in. We were there for around 3 hours. Nothing happened to any of us. About a week later, I talked to another one of my friends about the church. As soon as I mentioned it to him, his eyes went glossy and his skin turned pale. He told me if I was smart, I would never go back to that place again. Not believing him and being the person that I am, bull-headed, I decided to go back there, this time on my own. I told one of my sisters and she agreed to drop me off and pick me up several hours later. Whilst I was inside the church by myself, a few things happened to me that I still get goosebumps thinking about. There were pigeons flying through the building. I was making a lot of loud noises, slamming stuff onto the floor, calling out, provoking whatever was there, trying to get something to happen. and this was disturbing the birds. As I called out, a pigeon fell dead in front of me, its head missing. The pigeon's body was convulsing and blood was spraying out as if it had just happened. I called out again, saying that if whatever was there and responsible for that, it should do it again or show itself. It was then that a being of around 10 feet tall appeared directly in front of me. It was all black and raised its hand. The head of the pigeon dropped from its fingers and then disappeared. At that moment, I feared for my life. I tried to leave the building by the way that I had come in, but no matter how hard I pushed against the boards, they would not budge. And at every other exit point, I did not have any strength to get out. Now, mind you, at 14 years old, I was 5'10" and weighed 250 pounds, and I could carry 200 pounds in each hand without problem. So I know I was not a weak person. Still, I could not get out. After about an hour of trying to leave, I came to the realization that it did not want me to leave. So I stayed where I was until my sister came to pick me up. When she arrived, she came to the same point where I was sitting, and I told her that I could not push the boards back. She reached over and pulled, and was able to open up the boarded area with hardly any effort. When she saw me, she could not believe the mess that I looked. I was pale and looked like I had been crying for hours. But that would not be the last time I would go to that church. I had told one of my friends that had been there before and had nothing happen to him what had happened to me, and he wanted to go. I agreed to go with him, but said I would not do any provoking of any kind. So later that week, we went back to the church and decided that we were going to spend the entire night there. I had seen the figure and what it could do, and knew that it was demonic in nature. I was a devout Catholic at the time, and I carried a crucifix with me this time, in the hopes that I would be safe from anything that would seek to harm me. After about 2 hours of being in this church, things started happening. Boards were getting moved around, and certain things like old pews were lifted and dropped ever so slightly, but loud enough that the sound rang through the entire building. I remember losing my friend for a moment because I was stuck in prayer. He had wandered off and said that he could see a woman in white. After I had said the Lord's Prayer several times, I went to find him. When I found him, he was sitting in a corner of the room, holding himself in the fetal position, crying. I asked him what was the matter, and he told me that the woman he had followed showed him how he would die. It would not be a natural death, but rather something manifested. He wanted to leave, and I was willing to go with him, but when we started for that one door, that giant black figure appeared again. It laughed at us and told us how weak we were. I never felt so vulnerable in my entire life. It was like I was an ant under a magnifying glass getting burned. That was the last time I went to that church. Several years later, my friend died in a freak car accident. Now I am haunted by something that followed me from that church. If you are a skeptic in any way, shape or form, please believe me when I say that the devil is real and he wants you more than you could ever want anything in your life. 10 years after I was inside of that church, I was with the woman that I would give my whole heart to. She was into different things that I never knew were real, like Reiki sessions and things such as that. We went together one time to a festival in her hometown where people would do Reiki and have readings and all sorts of things that I have been naive to, even though I have had so many paranormal things happen to me already. While I was there, she talked me into having a Reiki session. I agreed to it because it looked silly, and so I laid down and she started going over me with these crystals. I have never felt so scared again in my life. It was supposed to be an aura cleansing, but it felt like a raking sensation across my skin. During the session, one woman who claimed to be able to see auras said that she saw my aura and saw that it was trying to fight out of a black aura that encompassed my body. She told me that my aura was good, but that I had something following me and trying to block out my aura. After telling the woman about my past, she told me that I should either see a priest or a shaman and have myself cleansed. At this point in my life, I had fallen from the Catholic Church because of some of the things that I had seen in the church growing up, so I talked to a shaman. Right away, he started the cleansing process with me. He was also friends with someone who worked in the paranormal, and so he asked if the session could be recorded to see if there were any EVPs. I agreed to this, and the session began. I've never felt so much weight get lifted off me at one time. About 2 weeks later, I was contacted and was asked if I had time for a phone call conference with the paranormal investigator. So I scheduled a time with him, and when he called me back, he played me the cleansing session. What I heard was a woman screaming almost the entire time. It was not too loud, but it was there. Something had attached itself to me, and I had carried it with me ever since I went to that church. Despite the cleansing, it is still with me. Once in a while, it will rear its ugly face in my life. I know that I am probably stuck with it until the day I die. But now, knowing what I know how to combat it and keep it out of my life for the most part. Thank you for watching. Before I end this video, I just want to make a quick announcement regarding Halloween. The spookiest time of year is fast approaching, and to celebrate, I have completely relaunched my merchandise store. Head over to Teespring or take a look at the bar below this video to see my new merch, including my very own limited edition Halloween design. Also in the store is the classic Paranormal Scholar quill and ink on everything from tees to mugs to hoodies to totes, as well as a few fun designs I created myself. Also, for Patreon members, Grand Fellow and above, keep an eye on the mail for your personalised Halloween cards. Members can also get a discount on merch, so be sure to use your promo codes. To conclude, as always, thank you to everyone who so kindly and courageously shared their stories for this episode. If you have a real paranormal story you would like me to narrate, you can submit via the form on my website at paranormalscholar.com. And if you cannot wait until my next video, why not check out the one suggested on screen now? Until next time.